Welcome to Nurture Small Business, Creating a Thriving Space, with your host, Denise Kagan. Denise is the president of DCA Virtual Business Support and has been a business owner for almost 20 years. DCA Virtual Business Support provides small businesses with an expert pairing of virtual administrative and marketing assistance to match your needs. Learn more at dcavirtual.com.
Malcolm Dawes is the most sought-after authority on people performance and effectiveness. He's a recognized expert in showing people how to increase their interaction effectiveness through behavioral change. For many years, Malcolm has experienced firsthand the struggles senior executives face with accelerating the performance of their team. He's appeared on a host of radio and TV interviews, and he is an author. In his latest book, Team Performance, Why Can't We All Get Along? Malcolm dispels 10 myths that many senior executives have about unlocking the true potential of their teams. Welcome to the show, Malcolm.
Thank you, Denise. Good to be with you.
I am so excited. So, we're meeting here. It's 8 a.m. for me, and I think it's about 10 p.m. for you because we're a world apart, literally.
Indeed.
Tell me about your beautiful background.
I'm talking to you from Sydney in Australia, which, as you say, is 10 p.m. on Thursday, 8 a.m. your Thursday. And my background shows two, I guess, the most iconic parts of Australia, certainly of Sydney, of the Sydney Opera House and Sydney Harbour Bridge. Harbour Bridge was built in 1923, well ahead of its time, 8 lanes of traffic when there's still horse and carts in Sydney at the time.
Wow.
There were some cars, of course, but it's now got 2 train tracks and 8 lanes of traffic, but it was built and hasn't been grown since. And of course, the iconic Opera House. So yeah, that's my background.
Perfect. And I noticed that you do some volunteer work in your local area. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I work for or volunteer for the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, which is the largest volunteer fire service in the world. 75,000 volunteer members, I think. About 50 of whom are over there in the US and Canada at the moment fighting the fires. So I've been with them for 10 years, recently promoted to deputy captain, and was heavily involved in the really bad fires we had here in 2019, 2020, your winter, our summer, which unfortunately you're experiencing there once again in the US. So I really enjoy doing that. It sounds a bit crazy that you should enjoy doing it, but it's something that I feel I give back to Australia. I'm from the UK originally, so I feel it's something that gives back to the community that sort of welcomed me into Australia 20 years ago.
That's fantastic. I think it's a great idea for business owners to find some balance with doing things in their community, and not everybody has time, so they do it in different ways, but I think that's awesome that you do that.
Thank you. Yeah, and you're right. It is a balance. I've got family, I've got kids who are all grown up now, but it's still getting that balance. And I think there are aspects of my business life and my volunteer life that are very closely linked, especially around leadership and working with other people. So I enjoy that aspect.
So that's a great segue for us to start talking about your book. Tell me about the title, Team Performance, Why Can't We All Get Along? How'd you choose that title?
Yeah, it's a book which really reflects, I guess, all my years in business. I started my career a long time ago as a nurse. Always wanted to be a doctor, but didn't do so well at school. So started as a nurse, went into the pharmaceutical industry as a sales representative selling medicines, but always had a passion for training and working with people. So progressed through management and so on. And the book really looks at team performance and reflects the experiences I had both as a team member, as a manager of people, and also more recently, and by recently I mean the last 20 years, working with all sorts of teams in all sorts of industries, large and small, and looking at the things that managers try and do to get their teams to work together, to perform. So the title, Team Performance, Why Can't We All Get Along, is really, well, every manager, every team leader wants their people to get together, work together and perform, but there's something that doesn't quite, hit the mark. And the book really is 10 really short chapters about, I guess, the myths of management and what people try, and I've tried in my career, and I've observed other people, other managers try to get their people to work together. And unfortunately, those things often fail. And there's several examples I could give you. But those things that everybody tries, but don't, as I say, don't quite hit the mark. So the book sort of talks about, okay, you've tried this. Well, maybe there's something else you could do or should do, or you could try in terms of being a stronger leader.
Could you give me one of those examples? Because I'd like to just kind of compare it to what I'm doing.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the examples I would give would be, I guess the classic one is when a manager says to his or her team, hey guys, let's all get together and have a team building event. Let's go 10-pin bowling, or let's go laser shoot, or paintballing. Those sort of things, I guess, you have in the US, the same as we have in Australia, the same as we have in other parts of the world. So everybody goes, yeah, let's do that. So they all go to the 10-pin bowling. They go to the bowling alley. And the idea is to unite the team, is to get a team to work together. And the first thing that the manager says is, okay, you three work together, your team A, and you three work together, your team B. And before you know where you are, this team, which is supposed to be united, is now pitted against each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying there's anything wrong in having a social event and having some fun and having some competition between people within an organization or people within a team. But if you dress it up as a team building event, it fails, because what you hear in your head is, hey, we're going to work together, we're going to be stronger as a team. And by the end of 2 hours in a bowling lane, and especially if you've had a few beers as well, everybody's saying, well, we beat you. Same as the sort of corporate exercises, the corporate training, which I've been involved with over the years. Let's build a raft and get from one side of the river to the next. And everybody builds a raft and it's competing against each other. So those are the sort of, that's a real sort of simple example where I guess many people have experienced that, what I might call enforced fun. The idea being, we get together, we build a team, but we actually compete against each other.
And that's
another example
that's not the mindset that you want to instill if you're trying to team build.
No. As I say, there's nothing wrong with having social events, whether it's barbecues, going to the movie, building a raft, having fun. There's nothing wrong in that. But if a manager tries to put it or dress it up as a team building event, and there's a lot of companies out there that say we do team building, but actually I see it often as team dividing, because people say I didn't work well against these guys and we fought, and another one is another myth is where people do all sorts of diagnostic tools. They do interpersonal skills things where they give somebody a questionnaire, and you may have done it yourself, Denise. You fill in a questionnaire and say, let's find out your personality traits, and you fill in the questionnaire and you get the results and you go, wow, that's so like me. Well, of course it's like you, because you filled it in. And so then people say, and I run workshops on interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence and so on. And what we try and do is to get feedback from others. And in fact, only this morning, Sydney time, 5 p.m. New York time, I was talking to a client of mine in New York, and we were giving them some feedback on a diagnostic tool where they get their self-perception and others' perception. And it's quite amazing, because your self-perception says one thing, but others say something else. So another one of the myths I talk about in the book is, if you want some feedback, get feedback from other people, get feedback from those people that you work with, and maybe that report to you if you're a leader or a manager, because it gives you a much broader perspective of how people see you and how you lead and how you manage and how you work with them, because a self-perception measure is what you see in yourself, which may be accurate to a degree. There is research which suggests it's about 33 to 35% accurate when you compare it to what other people see in you.
You know, we use a it's more of like a communication assessment versus personality traits, though some personality traits are included in it, and it's not work style, but we use something, it's very simple, called people styles. It basically breaks people up into 4 different, you know, you're a director, an expressive, an analytic, or an amiable. I'm a director,
Yeah.
not surprised, I'm a business owner. Okay. In most of my, we've got people in all quadrants, so it's not a pass fail type of assessment at all.
Sure.
But it is a self-assessment, and it's interesting that you say getting other people's perspective, because that's something that we talked about, and I think we might need to go ahead and do that to make sure that, hey, the way, especially leadership, the way we've assessed ourselves, this is actually how the team sees us. Okay. And if there's mismatches, trying to, you know, figure out why there's mismatches and reconcile that.
It's a critical, sorry, Denise. Yeah,
no, you're fine.
I think it's a critical point, and it's a good one that you make, that I've worked in many organizations and done all sorts of diagnostics, and the one that you mentioned there about expressives and amiables and so on is a well-known tool. And it's valid from the point of view that you fill in your self-perception. But the interesting thing is there that, and in the book I mentioned about what I call a badge of honor. You wear the badge on your chest, which says, okay, and in some models there's the term driver or initiator, or in some models it's a color and it's red. And I remember vividly working with a team once, and a guy came up to me and he said, well, I came out as a red, as a driver, as a real sort of dominant individual, as a disc. You may have heard of disc as well.
Yes, I think I
the
show up high
dominance
with
part.
that too.
Yeah. And I write about it in the book because it's another one of those myths where if you do a self-perception measure, you wear the badge of honor that says, I'm dominant, I'm tough, I'm a go-getter, I'm results focused, and I tell it like it is. And you've just got to get over that, and you've just got to accept me for what I am. Now, the downside of
no.
I'm not saying that that's what you do, but it was an example to me of a self-perception, which says, here's what I think I am. The feedback, the form that I filled in reinforces that. So I then go out to my colleagues, to maybe if I'm a leader, to the people that I work with, and say, you've got to deal with me. My philosophy is the other way around. It says, okay, if I know I'm, you know, dominant or more quiet, or I'm more analytical, or I'm more friendly or amiable, in whatever terminology you want to use, I need to understand my behavior, but then I also need to change and adapt and be flexible with my behavior towards somebody else. So as you say, Denise, you see yourself as perhaps a little bit more direct, a bit more of a driver. You're a business owner. So, and that's fine. You know, you don't need to be a driver to be a business owner.
No, not at all.
No, but I think, you know, to me, the key here, or the technique, and it's not a trick, it's actually a skill, is to say, okay, if I recognize that Denise is more of a driver or a dominant or a direct person, what do I need to do to communicate with Denise so that we have a better communication, we have less conflict, we have more productivity, and there's just a bit of harmony in the workplace?
Absolutely. So the tool we use actually does do that. It talks about how to modify your behavior. Me being a driver, yes, I tend to be very direct, and how to kind of tone that down a little bit, especially with people with different styles. You know, the ones across the left side of the chart, you know, they prefer less direct. So I have to be careful. You know, I can't say, hey, did you do this? It's due today. Like, hey, tell me about the progress on this. It's a minor modification. I'm asking the same thing though.
Absolutely. And behavior flexibility, as I use the term behavior flexibility, it's a little bit like tuning a radio. So we all have our preferred style. We all get up in the morning and, you know, you get up in the morning, I get up in the morning, we all get up and say, hey, let's do the best thing we can. Nobody gets up in the morning and tries to annoy other people. I don't think we purposely go out and do that, but we just do because of our behavior, because of our style. And this flexibility thing, the tuning of the radio, many years ago, you used to tune a radio by turning a dial. Nowadays, you just push a button and it finds all the stations and presets it for you. But, you know, you remember your listeners and the people that listen to the podcasts will remember turning a dial perhaps, and a tiny little adjustment on the dial from that sort of white noise. A tiny little turn on the dial makes a massive difference when you find your favorite station, whether it's country music or whether it's rock and roll or jazz or whatever. And what you've just described there is is the same thing. It's a very tiny adjustment to your language, to your terminology, which can make a huge difference to the outcome of a conversation. So, you know, all those things around behaviors and understanding other people is critical. But I find that in many organizations, through no fault of their own, tend to spend a lot of their dollar, training and development dollar, on technical and knowledge skills, or sort of technical and knowledge areas, I should say, around their particular business, rather than those skills which help us to work together as human beings and as members of a team.
And your company, DTA Worldwide, does that.
Yeah, absolutely. We I guess we're a little bit different in so much that, you know, if you were to look at what we do, we look at leadership development, we look at team performance, but it's not just telling people about, here's a skill which is about how to work it as a member of a team. We sort of pare it back a little bit. We sort of strip it away a little bit and get people to think about themselves as a human being. I always remember one of the first jobs I had when I left nursing was, as I mentioned earlier on, was to be a medical representative. I remember the managing director taking a group of us to the window when we were on training, took us to the window of the building overlooking the car park. And he said, what do you see? And we said, well, cars, there's a car park. We see cars. And he said, okay, so what does that represent? And we said, people coming to work. Sure. And he said, what happens when the cars go away? He said, well, there's no people here. And he said, so what does that represent? Well, there's no people, so there's no work being done. He said, correct. And it doesn't matter what business you're in, whether you're selling medicines, whether you're selling plants, whether you're selling Sydney Opera House or whatever, a business only works if you've got people in it who work together. And so what we do at DTA Worldwide is to try and get people to understand themselves from an emotional intelligence point of view and from a behavioral point of view, and how they can work more effectively with people in their teams. So whilst we talk about leadership and teamwork and sales, it's about that sort of the less tangible things. It's not about closing a sale. It's not about setting objectives. It's not about writing a process or setting a budget or writing objectives if you're a manager. Those things are critical and vital and are important. But as each individual manager and leader works with different people in their teams, how do they do that to the best effect by using, you know, their beliefs, their emotions, and their behaviors? That's what we do at DTA Worldwide.
So, so you come in and you work with leadership, not with the whole team, mostly with leadership. Is that correct?
Well, it's a very good question, which I might expect, Denise, because you're the person asking the questions. I have a view which is anybody can be a leader. Anybody in any role can be a leader. In fact, some of the best people I've come across in terms of their leadership capability are not necessarily classic or traditional managers or managers of people. I believe that any manager of people must be a leader. But you can be a leader without being a manager.
I agree to that.
Yeah. So, and in fact, I referred to it earlier on today. I was speaking to some people in New York virtually, as we are now, 7 a.m. my time, and 3 people, we were giving some leadership results. We have a leadership diagnostic called the Leadership Effectiveness and Development System. And not one of those people is a manager of people, yet they have a team leader who is believes that leadership is vital, because if everybody displays leadership, they can work within their own team, they can work across teams, and they can work interdepartmentally and indeed with external and internal stakeholders. Mm-hmm. So in answer to your question, yeah, we work with leaders, but how do you define a leader? I define a leader as somebody who, I guess it comes from Jim Collins, I think, or maybe somebody else. There's a definition which says that leadership stems from personal humility, not positional strength or power.
I like that. Leadership comes from personal humility rather than strength or power.
So it's about what you possess as a human being, not what it says on your business card or on your door or on your desk plate. It's what you bring to the job that you do. It's your, and it was Jim Collins who talks about the paradox. Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great and other books, he writes about the paradox of high-level leadership being that is a paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will. The professional will being that thing which I guess is more aligned to management, the achievement of objectives, the achievement of outcomes, profit, market share growth, etc., and business growth. And the paradoxical blend of that with personal humility. And I think that leaders are people that there's a classic phrase, which is leaders are those people that when things go wrong, look in the mirror, and they look in the mirror at themselves and say, what did I do that made this go wrong? And what do I need to do to put it right? Whereas people who don't fall into that category don't look in the mirror, they go, whose fault was it? And they apportion blame. They're pointing the finger of blame to somebody else. And that's very common, sadly, in society. And I believe that what used to be the leaders in our communities globally, politicians, sports people, business people, celebrities, we've lost that leadership there. Just look around you and, everybody's being brought to book, as it were. And the other thing about leadership is when something goes right, they look at the people that created the thing that went right. In other words, they say, hey, Denise, it was your work that enabled us to achieve this outcome, to complete the project on time within budget, to ensure that the client got the best outcome. They don't take the praise for themselves. And I'm sure you, like your listeners, will know of many occasions where they've been sat in a meeting or at an event where the manager takes the praise for themselves. They say, I did this, I achieved that. Well, no, it wasn't them, it was somebody in their team. So those best leaders are the ones that, to use that phrase again, it's not about positional power, it's about personal humility. It's not about taking the praise for themselves, but giving the credit where credit is due. And when things go wrong, they accept it as their accountability. And I think accountability is something that is sadly missing in many parts of leadership at the moment. Everybody tries to pass the buck to somebody else.
It is. Fortunately, accountability and humility can be learned. I know myself as a young leader, I had great operational skills. That's always been there. I did lack those other things though, but along the way, I had to learn them because, again, self-reflecting, looking at, I just did that, said that didn't go over well. What can I do better? So that self-reflection is super important.
It is. And I think many of us get into jobs because of our technical ability, because of our knowledge. Mm-hmm. And, we do very well. And classically, what happens in many organizations is, and you see it all the time in sales. I was a salesperson after I left nursing when I was a medical representative. And you saw it classically in the sales environment in the pharmaceutical industry where I worked, but also in other sales industries and across other organizations as well. And that's to say, where you're a good technical operator, you've got good knowledge, whether that be in sales or whether that be in IT or human resources, you're a good technology person, i.e. you know your trade, you know what you're doing. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, Denise, hey, Malcolm, you're doing such a great job, we'll make you into a manager. And then all of a sudden, you're not just a manager, we want you to be a leader. And nobody gets any development and nobody gets any training.
Skills are totally different.
Totally different. And I've seen so many brilliant practitioners, people that are technically expert in IT, in engineering, in sales, being given management roles because they're brilliant at what they do. And they take the jobs because it's great credibility. They get a promotion. Mm-hmm. It looks good to their family and friends. And hey, they get more money and probably a bigger car. You know, cars are not as important these days, you know, in environmentally friendly times, but you know what I mean. But those people often flounder. They struggle because there hasn't been that leadership development. There hasn't been that understanding. And again, I refer just to my meeting 12 hours ago, where this lady was really promoted by her manager, who was also on the call. And she said, hey, I've worked with this lady before and she's brilliant. She's a brilliant, this was in a legal organization. And I gave her leadership results and they were low. And I said to her, have you had any leadership training? No, never. Have you had any leadership development? Never. Have you ever been? Never. And I said, okay, that's brilliant, because you now got a set of results from your peers and from people that work with you who say, hey, here's some areas for you to develop. And it's a classic example of a great practitioner in a legal division, knows the work, knows the job, knows the industry, is now being given an opportunity to become a leader and needs to develop that. And I think there's, you know, a great responsibility on organizations to have some sort of succession planning and to help people to get to those, you know, easier steps towards leadership before they get put into those roles. But again, it's one of those things that tends to fall between the cracks, if you know what I mean. Everybody spends their training dollar on the widget, the idea, the technical piece of knowledge, rather than all those skills which wrap around us, which we all need. And especially in this last 18 months, the number of times I've been called in the last 18 months to help with emotional intelligence and resilience, and hey, how do we get through this? And how do we cope? And those are the things we should be doing all the time, not just in times of difficulty like we've all been experiencing globally with the pandemic.
Absolutely. So one last question. So a company wants to promote from within. Okay. I think that's a great thing to do.
Sure.
But clearly, you know, the practitioner moving them up to leadership isn't necessarily going to work. What do they need to do as far as planning, and how long should they expect to take to develop that person? You know, is it 3 months, 6 months, 2 years? You know, what should a business owner realistically expect there?
Wow, great question. I guess, you know, in answer to the how long should it take, I guess it depends on a number of factors. It depends on the ability of the person, their drive and desire. I believe that any organization, and just going back to our conversation before, or at the early part of our conversation around my role as a firefighter, you know, I'm in a brigade of 60 or 70 people, ranging from, I guess, 17 years of age, and I think our eldest member is 74 years old. And even in that volunteer organization, we need to have a succession plan. I mentioned that I've just been promoted back in June to a deputy captain, a sort of an officer of rank. I've been in the brigade for 10 years. Now, without going into all the detail, there needs to be a succession plan which says, okay, what does this person need to do from the day they join to the day that they want to become a deputy captain or a senior captain or a group captain and so on. And the same as in any organization. The organization needs to have a plan which says, okay, we need X number of managers or leaders. We've got so many people in the organization. And let's say there's a ratio of 1 manager to 6 to 10 people, depending which organization you're in. And over a period of time, people are going to leave, move on, get promoted, etc. So the answer to your question, I guess, is it's how long is a piece of string, rather than a period of time which says it's going to take me 3, 6, 12, 18 months to train somebody. You start giving them those skills and expose them to things like leadership early on. As I said, you and I agreed before, you can be a leader without being a manager. So exposing people to leadership concepts, to things like interpersonal flexibility, to things like teamwork, to things like emotional intelligence, things like innovation and creativity, exposing people to those things early on. How do I counsel somebody? How do I work with them? How do I mentor them? As soon as we do that, then your succession plan is a step-by-step process, which is relatively straightforward. And it's not, you know, this week you do this and next week you do that. It becomes this, it becomes part of the fabric of the organization. And one of the things I think that there's 2 things I think that underpin that. One is interpersonal skills, the ability, as we talked earlier on, about recognizing behaviors and adapting your own behavior towards the other. And the second one is feedback, creating a culture of feedback. And rather than feedback being seen as criticism or praise, it's simply a conversation. It's something where you could say to me, hey, Malcolm, I enjoyed the conversation, I enjoyed the interview, but what I thought would have been better is if you were to say that. And I might say, yeah, I agree with you there, Denise. I'll think about that next time. But perhaps if, you know, we had decided to do this beforehand, or, do you know what I mean? It's that sort of ongoing conversation. But at the moment, in many organizations, it's just missing. So there's this, do your job, do your job, do your job, get better at IT, get better at engineering, get better at manufacturing, get better at putting the, you know, the plug into the hole to create a piece of material that we sell, instead of saying there's all this other stuff that goes on around. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. It tells me a lot of communication and pre-planning versus how long is it going to take to get this person from point A to point B.
And I guess, you know, if you know what point A looks like and you know what point B looks like, it makes it easier to do that. The time it takes to get there is dependent upon the person's desire to want to do that. And I think one of the things, again, in organizations and business, is that there's this perception that I start on, you know, I start on August the 12th, 2021, and by August the 12th, 2023, I've got to be a senior salesperson, or I've got to be a manager, or I've got to be a team leader. And then by August the 12th, 2025, I've got to be a manager. And if I don't do that, then I've failed. And that's rubbish. You know, there's so many people that are brilliant practitioners in whatever they do, and that's all they want to do, and they're experts at that. If you start taking them out of that role and dropping them into the management swimming pool where they drown or bob up and down at best, you know, it fails the individual, it fails the organization. So I think, you know, again, it's incumbent on organizations and leaders within organizations to recognize those people that want to do something else, and those people that want to remain the backbone and the spine and the people that keep an organization going because of their ability and desire to want to do that.
Absolutely. I have truly enjoyed this discussion. Before we sign off, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Well, they can look at the website, which is DTA. I was going to say www, but everybody knows that now, don't they? So it's DTAworldwide.com. And on there, you can also get a link to get a copy of the book, Team Performance, Why Can't We All Get Along? It's free. It's a real book. It's not a downloadable. We'll post it to you. And you can also find out on there some of the other things that we do around emotional intelligence and leadership. There's a couple of other interviews I've done with a local TV personality, which nobody in the world would know unless you live in Australia. Yeah, DCAworldwide.com, best place to go. And please reach out, get a copy of the book, and we'd love to be able to send you a free copy, a real paper book, which comes into your letterbox.
I like paper books.
Yeah, you don't get many of those these days.
I know. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Denise. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's Nurture Small Business, Creating a Thriving Space podcast. Learn more about your host at dcavirtual.com or by emailing her directly at denise@dcavirtual.com.